pointed out in the last video, this big 30-something inch tall pot that is too tall to fit in my kiln. And so I made a couple other pieces I wanted to show you that are going to go with it. Not quite as big, but let me give you a look. I used the same technique of a top and bottom bowl with a tube. Obviously I decided to make this one kind of a faux watering can. Did a same kind of finger pinch seam and stuck a couple leaves on there for fun. Now I've made one of these before just recently, and I had a real hard time getting a connection piece to not crack just with shrinkage, and it's hard enough to get these to not break at the seams. But so I'm going to leave this separate, and we'll glaze this separately, but in the end it'll give some support. This is intended for putting succulent plants in. So there are holes in each of the... But the way I did this, normally making attachments, I might cut a portion of the bowl off and stick it to the side, which is fine. They can crack. You have to support them with sponges and whatnot. But in this case, what I did is I made each bowl, they're all a little different, and I held the bowl on the wall and gave an outline cut of the profile of the curve. So I cut through and I bent it back. See, each one of these holes has a flat back, and then when the bowl went in, it's sealed off internally. So this is not open. This is not open to the interior. So anyways, I thought this was fun. It's a little bit lumpy. There's some lumps in the slab I rolled right here. You know, I just want to see this through glaze. I want to see if I can I want to see if these leaves will pop off. I've had them pop off at different times. I don't know. I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time. It's more of a concept piece, but I think it's super fun. So as you can see, this is for a water tap, and I left this foot ring separate so I can glaze it separate, but it's a water dispenser. So hopefully my measurements are right, and with shrink rate I can put a standard tap right there, and that's what the lid looks like. So big enough to be able to get ice in, big enough to get in there and be able to clean it. So hopefully we get it through glaze and turns out good. So there they are. Now I just need to go get the lid removed on the kiln and figure out how to get this set up for a fire. So I've gone ahead and removed the rear wall of my little kiln shed here because I want to get better access to the lid. This is what I'm going to have to do. I think the best move is going to be to leave this arm in place, and there's a bolt up there and there's a bolt right here at the hinge, and I should be able to take this disc off. I just need to remove some pivot pins and I should have a free lid. So you can see I have the mechanism removed. The lid is now resting here. So I have open access to the top of the kiln, and I'm going to start looking at how I can lay these out. I really don't want to cut them. I have 20 bricks, so that means I'd have to make 40 cuts. Just don't feel like doing that if I don't have to. Well, good news. I went and remeasured that tallest pot, and it is 32 inches, or just a hair under, and that with only a single course of bricks is going to get me just a little bit more than 32 inches, which is great. I really did not want to have to do a second course, maybe laying on its side, whatever it would be. But well, neither the saw cutting the brick nor just trying to use the saw to score it and then break it with a chisel, total fail. Not gonna work, so I have to come up with another plan. Okay, so here's what I came up with. I have some really stiff cone 10 kind of groggy tan clay that I wanted to use up anyway, so I wired it and rolled it into a relatively thick slab and then folded them up. Anyways, so I think that's gonna work, and we'll just let them cook. I plan on running the bisque really slow, and they're already short and they'll shrink even shorter, but I think that's gonna do what I need to do. What was I thinking? There's no way I'm gonna get another pot in here. Maybe a small one, but neither of those two big ones. You can tell actually is just under. So I've taken the bricks off. It'll give those little tiles a chance to dry, and I'm just gonna fire this real quick, and tomorrow we'll load the other two and fire that too. Well, it's next morning. I just took the lid off Looks like it went without incident, which is great. So let me get this out, and I want to get the next 2 pots in. I want to get the bricks installed and get the bisque on for the 2 bigger pots. Okay, so I have the bricks and the little filler tiles set up. I have the main event. The big piece easily clears. So now I just need to put the lid on carefully, and we're going to fire this to cone 05 for its bisque. The first thing I want to do is get the interior lined with white. And I have all these holes, so I've gone around with paper towels and plugged up the holes, and there's also a hole in the bottom of the whole pot that I have a small sponge jammed into. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to pour a fair amount of white glaze in there, slosh it around, of course, pour some of it out of this, and yeah, out the top, and then I can pull all those little stops out and clean up any little messes, and at least I'll have the inside done. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to put a little bit of a black underglaze in the cracks just to emphasize the texture of those leaves. I don't need much. Then we're going to put a translucent green, light green over it. And then we'll wax it so we can do the rest of the body in another color. Well, I'm not sure I like that, but hopefully the green will carry the day and it won't look like we have black leaves because... Okay, now for our transparent pistachio green. And I'm just trying to use up a small container of color that I had on hand. So I'm not sure how many coats I'm going to get, but I'm going to put 1 coat on each leaf and then just go back and forth, putting coats on until I get at least 3 coats or I run out. So let me do that, and then we'll let that tack up. We'll come back and we'll protect this with wax. Okay, so I have 3 coats of the green on. Now I'm going to take a little bit of wax and I'm going to wax the edges. So what I've decided to do is use a brush. I'm going to get a large brush out and I'm going to brush the entire body using up the rest of this cream breaking rust. So it'll be kind of a tan to brown. And then what I plan on doing is turning it upside down and dipping this in white to match the liner, and dipping the foot in white just to come up over the edge and help fill any little bit. So it's right here in between that I need to go and get a few coats on. I'm going to do that off camera and I'll come right back to you. Okay, so I've gone over this again and again, putting coats of that cream breaking rust on, and I gotta tell you, I cannot stand brushing on glazes, especially on something like this. Now this cream breaking rust, if you've seen it in previous videos or used it out of John Britt's book, if it's really thick, it will be a nice creamy color, maybe with some speckles, but if it's thin, it's going to be red or kind of, yeah, I guess orangey brown. And it's also really going to show brush marks. So after about the 4th coat of going around, it's really, you start to lose track of where you put it, and I've put enough on to see the texture go away, you know, be fully covered from the canvas texture of the slab. And as well, I went ahead and I waxed this tip right here, because when I dunk this top, it's going to put the tip of this in the glaze, and I'd rather not have white on that. Here it is after dunking the top and the bottom. And you can see I also went ahead and got this dipped in white and set in place. So we'll see how that turns out. Tomorrow the other pots come out of their bisque and we'll throw this in, and day after that we'll see what happened. Well, it's the next morning. I just took the lid off and everything looks like it fired. No problems, no cracks. Yep, so now I just got to get these out and get the glazed watering can put in for firing. Oh, let's check something first. Every time I do a firing, I make a note of the cost. $21.76. That's funny. The last firing I did a day or two ago was about $15 change. So clearly having these gaps makes it cost a little bit more. So there she is in the kiln, ready to fire, and I'm gonna get the lid on this and we'll see how this turns out. Okay, I'm getting ready to glaze these two and wanted to show you what I was thinking of doing. Obviously there's no hole in the bottom of this one, so I can simply fill it up in a normal way. I'm going to do a white liner on both. On this one I'm going to take a piece of sponge and jam it in the hole so I can pour some glaze in, manhandle it. I will do the glaze over the top completely and make sure that this lid is fired separately. And this foot ring also going to be glazed separately and will be set together and fired together. But I wanted to show you, I did have a little bit of cracking issues. It's obvious when you get up on it here. After 2 days of drying, a crack appeared right here and it went all the way through to the inside. And so I just filled it with paper clay and kind of rubbed it out. You can see where the texture has been kind of violated. So a little bit of a scar face there. I don't think it's going to completely disappear, but I'm hopeful that with a nice heavy coat of glaze, it'll smooth out and I think it'll look good. And it'll certainly seal up and hold water. So, and you may also notice that to fit this curve, I did come in here with a tool before I bisque fired it and carved away just a little bit so that that would clear and it wouldn't sit funny. I'll let that dry and that'll give me something to grab to dip the other side. And I'll just sponge off the foot off camera. So we have the white glaze on the inside, the ring is already glazed white, the lid is already glazed white. And what I want to do is do the full body in floating blue, and then we'll turn around and we'll dip this top in white. So we'll have white, a blue body, and a white foot. I have my sponge back installed in the hole. This time I put it in from the inside, just so it's a little smaller sticking out. Here's the question though. I only have about 3 gallons of floating blue, and I'm betting this bucket is tall enough to get to where I need, but it's kind of a gamble whether or not this pot will displace enough area to actually glaze the whole thing. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it, but I'm going to try. And if I can't get high enough, I'll just have to dip the top deeper. Oh yeah, we're gonna get it. That's it. And we're just gonna leave it because I need that glaze there. Then I'll let this dry and we'll flip it over and do the top. Top dipped in white. Dip the top and the bottom in white to make sure that we get good coverage. Okay, before I set this up to put the glaze on the side, I want to get this foot waxed because we're going to have all sorts of glaze running down the side and I just don't want to have to clean that. I'd like it to just fall away. So first thing I need to do is wax that foot. Okay, so you can see I have a drip tray. I have a turntable with a kind of a shield on it to keep it clean. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a Temmaku, that I made in a previous video using my own eggshells, so hopefully it breaks kind of goldy, kind of a stone finish. And then we're going to put some cover on it, and if I need to, I might add a little celadon as well, just for a third color. But for now, I want to get this Tembaku poured on carefully, and the foot is now fully waxed, so it should be protected, and we'll just let the excess run off. Whoa, there we go. Okay, now for the oil spot cover. Well, I really am excited to see how this is going to turn out. Specifically, I like how it's going to be kind of bumpy. It's going to be a little rustic. And I'd seen in this glaze that because of the eggshells I used, even though it was sieved, there are just kind of these little chunks. And I didn't sieve it this time, and I sieved it when I first made it, but I think it's going to look really good. Cleaning this foot was a real pain in the butt. I mean, the wax worked, and I was able to wipe everything off, but it was a lot of glaze there, and I actually had to go get my wife, and I held the pot up in the air with those rings, and she helped me get the rest off because I couldn't do it, you know, and it's all covered in wet glaze now, so it's not like you can pick it up. But there it is, and water pot is sitting nicely. It's 3 pieces waiting, so tomorrow it goes in the kiln. Can't wait to see. Well, it's the morning, and just pulled the lid off, and from what I can see, I don't see any problems. So I need to get this out. Alright, so we have the big pot and the water or beverage dispenser loaded up. Gotta get the lid on and fire this off, and tomorrow we get to see what it looks like. Well, we have had a fault. That FTL code with these bricks on top, I was not able to pull it up to full temperature. What a bummer. When it was firing, it was beeping at me towards the top, which means it's not able to accelerate the temperature as quick as the ramp hold setting is asking for. But usually it can pull through. In this case, it just stopped at 1909. So didn't get close. Everything's going to be a little matte on this. But let me get them out. We'll take a closer look. Okay, so here it is out of the kiln. I don't know how I feel about it. The glaze stuck together nicely on this little attachment. Overall, the color is kind of what I expected it to be. I really don't like how it's blushed. I'm not sure I hate it, but it's not what I was going for. This again is where it got thin, where I clearly didn't put enough of this glaze on. But the bowls will be filled with dirt, so you're not going to see that portion. And they're all sealed up really nicely. So, and the leaves, they do look a little green. Not as dark as I was fearing the underglaze was going to make them. So overall, for a first try, not bad. And if you're curious, this one ended up being just under 25 inches. So number 2, the water dispenser, the beverage dispenser. I think this turned out not too bad. Obviously it underfired, it didn't hit full temp, so this is much more matte. And you may be able to see it in the reflection. There are white drips that I had kind of rubbed off with my finger and normally would melt in, and you wouldn't have these kind of visible bumps. But so that's a bit of a bummer. The crack is visible but fully sealed. This right here is a real bummer. I should have caught that. And the reason I missed it is because obviously I turned around and dipped it so quick that this white went over it, and then final inspection it looked white. I could no longer see that I had splashed up a little bit of the floating blue right there, so that I don't like that. And also, this should not be tipped like this. So next time I do it, or if you choose to do it, get in there and really stretch this out and make sure that that opening is up and down. It would look much better not leaning. So, I don't know. Had this turned out well, I would have given it to a relative or, you know, friend, maybe. But since it's kind of wonky, I'm certainly not going to send this out into the world. Coincidentally, this hole also fits a wine cork. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this and use a wine cork. And I'm going to fill this with wood ash, and I'm going to be doing some lye extractions from the wood ash for a couple different things. But so this will be set up outside and filled with wood ash and used to make lye. And I'll also get to figure out, you know, is this thing going to hold up? Is there some leak I don't know about? I don't know. It should last seemingly forever if it's not hit by a falling branch or something. But so overall, I think that was real fun. I really like this pattern. It's really simple, and I am happy with how the glaze graduated from green to blue. And the lid turned out great. I think this is really has potential. These are very inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon and make yourself one of these. What a bummer that it didn't gloss up like I expected. This glaze is crazy too, but I'll show you that momentarily. But overall, final height on this is 30 inches. So through the firings, it's obviously shrunk. But let me bring you up close and show you this glaze. I suspect that the reason that it looks the way it does, in that it's kind of crawled and maybe even certain elements melted out while others did not, is because it just didn't get hot enough and it held at that lower temperature, trying for a while before it decided to give up. So I really like the texture actually, even though it's not what I expected. That's pretty cool. Let me bring you in and show you. So you can see here along the bottom where the white went up that it looks a little bit more like a traditional oil spot. But this is really interesting texture. I like these goops. They're really pretty pronounced. And I like this. Kind of a moonscapey look. And then you can see up here, this is clearly dull and not as shiny as it should be from the underfiring. I shouldn't have made it so big. That's the lesson I should learn. But overall, I think that was really fun. I did want to show you that this is what, you saw this in a previous video. This is what it looked like. This is the same Temaku, this is the same oil spot cover, and this is really what I expected to see compared to obviously what I got. So that is a big difference and fully attributable to the underfire. So lesson learned.